Meeting number 502 of the Lake George Park Commission. Michelle, forum.
Yes, you do.
Thank you. First item was the minutes of the previous meeting. Everybody had received a copy. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes?
Move to accept.
Seconded.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the minutes of the previous meeting. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Same thing with fiscal actions report. Everyone has a copy.
Motion.
Seconded.
Been moved and seconded to approve the fiscal actions report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Project review actions report. We have no projects. And Joe, do you have the project review action report?
Yes. Resolution number 2020-47, accept the project review actions report. Whereas the commission has received and reviewed the project review actions report prepared by staff and dated 12/8/2020, and the project review committee recommends acceptance of the project review actions report. Now therefore be resolved that the commission directs the project review actions report be incorporated in the minutes of the full commission meeting. So moved.
Second.
Seconded to approve the project review actions report. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. The first item then of any action on the agenda is a presentation on the Jefferson Project's rapid response to HAB in Lake George by Dr. Aurelia, Harry Kolar, and Eric Sly. Dave, do you want to introduce them or?
Yeah, I think at least Dr. Relier is familiar to everyone, and certainly you know Eric Sy. Harry Kolar is one of the key players in the Jefferson project, and we're fortunate to have these folks bring us up to speed on the work they're doing on the harmful algae bloom issue on Lake George. So thank you for coming.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, everyone. If I may, I'll share my screen. And I think the host needs to allow me to do it.
All right, I can do that. Hold on just a second. Okay, Rick.
Let's try that. There we go. All right. Can you all see that okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so thank you very much for allowing us to join your meeting. I provided you with an update maybe a year ago or so about the Lake George project, the Jefferson project. So we do want to talk about where we are in the response to the team to the HABS events. So we want to sort of break this into 4 pieces. The initial observations, the rapid response of the JP team, the preliminary results that we'd like to share with you, and then continuing research activities. So in terms of initial observations, we now know that there on October 23rd, there was a HAB observed on the west side of Clay Island, a couple weeks later confirmed by DEC. November 1st, our researchers are out working in some of the mooring lines of our vertical profilers, and they see a lot of cyanobacteria in the water. But it wasn't until November 7th when LGA, Kristen from the LGA, identifies the first suspicious HAB in Harris Bay. Then 2 days later on a Monday, 4 suspicious HABs are observed, and kudos to the LGA for being on top of these different HABs. Cyanobacteria is also seen that day as a surface film over at our field station by one of our researchers who identified it as this genus called Dilica Sperm, which you see the photos of here. We now know that that's what everyone was seeing. In total, we have 5 algal blooms visually identified. To my knowledge, 2 of them have been confirmed as HABs by DEC. They're in Harris Bay and on the west side of Clay Island. The others would be, I think, classified by DEC as suspicious HABs. and to my knowledge, not been confirmed yet. The surface blooms, by all accounts, were localized. They're ephemeral. That is, they were there for several hours and then weren't there after that. On November 9th, that water sample that was collected by LGA is confirmed, as many of you know, to be a Dilica Sperm. The sample that we took in Harris Bay, also that species, Dilica Sperm fuscum. And both of those samples were tested for toxins, and no toxins were detected. I think everyone probably knows that much of the story. A little bit of background on Dilica Sperm. It is common in Lake George. It's not a new species, not an invasive species, et cetera. We know it's been there for decades, probably been there for centuries. It typically lives throughout the water column, especially in a very clear lake. It may be living, down to 30 feet and then all the way up to the surface, which is what these cyanobacteria do. It's weakly buoyant. It only comes to the surface when the winds are really calm, which is the condition that we had those couple of days. It can rise to the surface within hours. That is, it controls its own buoyancy. And typically it would rise either to get sun or to find warmer temperatures, et cetera, but it has the ability to rise. It has a pretty slow growth rate, a 2-day generation time at warm temperatures, even slower at the temperatures at the time of the HAB event, which is about 12 degrees C, although the very surface water would have been warmer than that, the top centimeter or so. So the population can grow in the warmer surface film, but the population growth rate would still be fairly slow relative to the speed at which these blooms appeared and disappeared. As we see it, there are really two key questions that all of us want to understand. Were the suspicious and confirmed HABs in all these locations, were they produced in those locations, or were they transported to those locations by surface currents in the water? And the second, which is a really key question, was this an unusual natural event, or was this somehow connected to human activities, or both? Those are the things that we all want to know. Those are the things that really are the targets of what we're working on. I can't say enough about the rapid response of the team of the Jefferson Project, coordinating as well with the teams from DEC and LGA. Within hours, water samples are being taken, deployments are being made. This is one of our vertical profilers. In the map, you see 2 red dots. Those are 2 locations, one just outside of Harris Bay and the other up by Calves Pen as sort of a control to understand what's happening to the water. So the next day, we're putting those out in those 2 locations. We have survey teams going all over the South Basin, sampling 31 different sites. We sample a subset of those twice more during November 13th and 20th. So we've got boats of people out there being very COVID responsible, so limited numbers, wearing PPE, et cetera. And what we want to ask is, what are the conditions all over that southern basin, not just where the HABs were, but as importantly, where the HABs were not reported to be. So we're measuring the temperature of the water all through the depths, the oxygen turbidity, et cetera. We're measuring the abundance of the different algal groups. So cyanobacteria is one group, but there's green algae. There's a whole bunch of other big groups of algae that live in the lake. We're sampling for nutrients all over this southern basin and at multiple depths. We're taking algal samples because we want to understand what this species is doing, where is it abundant. So we took more than 70 samples of the algae and 70 samples of the nutrients over 3 different surveys spanning 2 weeks. So a really extensive effort by a huge team of people. And of course, there's another effort we'll talk about by people who are working remotely to help us understand what's happening. On the IBM side, we've got the serious modeling effort of the lake weather and the local circulation of the water. This is just an example of model output when we're looking at lake circulation. It's not the specific circulation on a particular day. These are things that are rapidly initiated and are still in progress to understand at very local scales. What's the surface water doing? What's the deeper water doing? If water comes in at the surface, it's got to go out of a bay in the deeper water, et cetera. So all of that is still work in progress, and we'll be sharing that with the public as it comes out. We've also done work in remote sensing. On the left is just the raw data of satellite data. On the right is we can pull out the signals of the amount of chlorophyll that are in different bays and look at that before, during, and after the events to get just another view of what's happening in these different parts of Lake George. We do want to share some preliminary results because we think they're quite interesting, and these are the things that we have high confidence in saying. Other things we're still working on, as I'll go through, to give you a sense of where we are. Let's talk about lake stratification. The lake is still stratified during the HAB. The thermocline's at about 40 meters. Of course, in Harris Bay, the deeper parts of Harris Bay, it's about 15 meters. So you wouldn't see the thermocline in Harris Bay because it's deeper than Harris Bay, but the lake is still stratified. It's not mixing yet. A couple of weeks later, it is. It starts mixing about 3 weeks later than this November 9th date. In terms of algal abundance, the first cut at this is we're looking at total chlorophyll A. That is all algae, not just cyanobacteria, but every other group of algae. What's it look like? And it turns out that the amount of algae total concentration is within the range that we typically see in November. That is, fortunately, we have years of data of algae, and we can ask how unusual was the amount of algae that we saw, and it's within the range that we see. We can look at just one part of the algae, the cyanobacteria, and ask, well, how concentrated was it relative to past Novembers? And it turns out that that's also within the range of what we've seen last year, the year before, et cetera. So it's all pretty typical. How about nutrients? We just finished testing all the nutrients, the 70-some samples. Total phosphorus concentrations across the entire South Basin, they are also within the range normally observed in November of past years. They are on the upper end of that range. So maybe there's something there, but right now we're confident to say they're within the range that we see. Same with nitrogen. Total nitrogen concentrations across all those sites, they're in the range. So we're not seeing across the South Basin, substantially elevated nitrogen and phosphorus, nor are we seeing substantially elevated algal abundance. I want to break that down just a little bit. This is these are some data from different sites. You see the green diamonds. These are different sites. They're abbreviated on the x-axis, but you can see things like HB is Harris Bay, WB is Warner Bay, et cetera. And what we're doing here is we're breaking the algae down into 4 major groups. And you see those groups listed in that bold black font. So I won't read them all, but the thing to pay attention to is cyanobacteria. That's that light blue bar. And the thing that you can see here is cyanobacteria certainly is pretty much everywhere we look, but it's a pretty small relative proportion of the algae that you see there. So, the chrysophytes, the diatoms, the green algae, et cetera, are the vast majority of the algae that you see in the lake. It's not to say that, we don't have a film of algae at the top that's cyanobacteria, but in the grand scheme of things, it's a fairly small proportion of the algae in these different sites, including places like Harris Bay. So those are the things we have lots of confidence in telling you. There's a lot of other current activities that we're also working on that we're going to report back to you in the future. They're just going to take a whole lot more work. So we're going to answer these 2 key questions that we talked about. Was it locally produced or did it get pushed into these bays? And was it a natural event or was it, are there signals of human activities? And to be fair, we don't know yet. But here's how we figure this out. We have lots of work to do on the analysis of these vertical profiler data. That is those platforms that we have out there looking at lake circulation, looking at local weather conditions, looking at the profilers from the surface down to the bottom of temperature and oxygen, et cetera. We're improving and validating the weather models and the circulation models around those bays to ask, is it all consistent with one mechanism or the other? Do we see lake circulation patterns that the surface waters would have moved them into particular bays or not? So that's still in progress. As I mentioned, working on analyzing satellite images that are taken before, during, and after these events. see if we get additional insights from that. And one of the things that we have a great benefit of doing is assaying the nutrients and the cyanobacteria resting stages that are down in the sediments. So this particular cyanobacteria, Dilica Sperm, makes a resting stage. And this winter we'll go, when there's ice on the lake, we'll go in and sample the sediments to ask, you know, do in those places where we had these blooms, do we now have more resting stages that could be the source of future blooms? So those are things that we'll be working on this winter. Because we've been working on the lake quite a while now, you know, really for decades, we have great baseline data to ask about historical context. How unusual was this event and these conditions compared to history? One of the things that we are really fortunate to have is part of our sampling program. You've heard maybe about the 30-year study or the 40-year study of monitoring the lake. For the last 8 years, we've been archiving samples of algae, and we have them preserved. We're going to go and ID those algae to find out what are the normal dynamics of this species, Dilica Sperm. How abundant is it normally in October and November, and how does that compare to this year? So we have that ability. We're going to look at past studies, and there's a number of past studies where we can look at the abundance of Dilica Sperm. Is why we know, for example, it's been in the lake for at least decades. We're going to characterize how unusual that warm, calm condition, and the calmness may be a real key here. So we want to ask, how unusual is that? Did we just get a perfect storm of conditions that allow this to happen naturally, or was there some human role to play here? And then I'll just share a few final thoughts that I think are pretty important. You know, we're taking this multifaceted approach. We're trying to give the community the most complete understanding of what happened, how it happened, and that's really the key to mitigating it happening in the future. It requires a lot of people on our team, more than 20 people, again, within a day are on the lake working on this, working on computer models, et cetera. And the honest truth is it's going to take us months to get all the data and analyze all the data and make sure that we've got the right answer. We are really fortunate that we can build on more than 40 years of work at our Darren Freshwater Institute, more than 7 years of work by the Jefferson Project. All of that baseline data, all of that modeling effort, all of that has been happening over 7 years. So it's incredibly useful that we have that background. Excuse me. And we'll, of course, continue collaborating with New York DEC, the LGA, and any other stakeholders. This really has to be a cooperative effort, and that's how we're approaching it as well. And I really want to underscore, we are committed to continuing to share our discoveries with the public as we've done today. We'll continue to have updates on what we're finding. And this really is part of our agenda that you've probably heard us talk about. The Jefferson Project, motivated by Governor Cuomo's initiative, the HABS initiative, it brought us to other lakes. It brought us to Skaneateles Lake. It brought us to Chautauqua Lake this year. And as you've probably heard us talk about, one of our big motivations is going out to those lakes where HABs happen often, helps us understand, helps us improve our expertise and our abilities to track these things and to bring that back to Lake George. That's always been the reason that we've gone back to these, we've expanded to these other lakes. Not hoping that we never have a HAB on Lake George, but given the unfortunate situation that we have, we are really well prepared to attack this problem, and that's what we're doing now. The final thing I'll say is you can find updates. We continue to update the Jefferson Project website. It talks about what we're doing, when we're doing it, what we're finding, et cetera. We'll continue to update that, and you can see the link right there. And we are happy to take your questions. Harry Kolar from IBM, Eric Sy from the fund, and I are all, I think, on now. And thank you so much for giving us some time to tell you about what we're doing and the progress that we're making.
Okay, Rick, I have a question for you. The bar charts that you had shown, was that a sample of one or many samples in that particular area?
The bar chart that showed the different kinds of algae?
Yes.
I believe that was one of the 3 surveys that we did in those different locations. And we'll certainly ask if, the reason we did 3 surveys is to ask whether whether that held up over the 2 weeks that we continued to survey the areas.
Rick, a quick question for you. In your experience working with HABs, how many lakes have you ever experienced that simply have one HAB and then you just don't see them again? Is that a very rare occurrence, or do you, I guess the longer term question is, do you expect this to occur in the future on Lake George based on your current experience?
Well, I think that's the thing that we'd all like to be able to predict with certainty, and I don't know that we can predict it with certainty. The general paradigm is once you have one, your probability increases of having another one. That is not me saying you're going to have another one in Lake George. The first step, I think, is we need to understand why it happened. For example, if there were evidence that increasing nutrients were driving this, you'd be more inclined to say, we don't get a handle on nutrients, you're going to have another one. If it turns out, and again, the jury is out on this, so I'm not leaning one way or another. If it turns out that it was an unusual set of natural circumstances, you'd be less inclined to say that rare set of circumstances would give you another one because they're rare. So I think that's why those 2 questions are so key in understanding this. And these are not easy questions to solve and get the answers to, but I think the Jefferson Project has a very good chance of doing that given the different perspectives and the different tools that we have.
What kind of efforts are you going to make to try and find out if it was if it originated in that particular spot or that it actually migrated over to that area?
So there's a couple of things that we can say right from the start, which is it's clear that this species of cyanobacteria was appearing in a lot of different places, not just in the places that were suspicious HABs, but in other places. Say, at the day that it's being seen in Harris Bay and Sandy Bay and Warner Bay and Lake George Village, we're also seeing it over by Bolton Landing. So it appears that it was coming to the surface in multiple locations. That would lend you to think maybe it was coming to the surface all over the South Basin. We don't know, but it's consistent with that. A key part of this that we're working on now is, we've been modeling how this water circulates from top to bottom, east to west, north to south. And the team is now looking at right around those bays, given what we know about the physics of how water moves, given that what we know about the weather, and we have lots of weather stations dotted around that lake, as many of you know, what do the models predict about the way that would drive the surface water? Would it, do those models suggest that the very top of the lake would be pushing in to those bays or not? That's a pretty key piece, because if it wasn't, you'd be more inclined to think that they grew there locally. The challenge with growing there locally is, as I mentioned at the beginning, they have a pretty slow generation time. That is, they don't grow overnight. They don't grow in a matter of hours. It takes 2 days for them to double their population size. Now, it certainly can be a mix of the two. It could be, for example, that we had a somewhat unusual amount of growth in the lake throughout meters and meters of water. And then the conditions got just right where they all came to the surface and then got pushed. So that's why it can be both. And that's what we're looking at now is what is the evidence that, how much was maybe being pushed, how much was we had an unusual population size. We have the ability to answer all of those in the coming months, which is the good news. We have enough historic data to know, is it an unusual amount? And we have the modeling data to tell us, were the currents moving in a way that suggests they could all be concentrated in these kind of dead end places?
Does the boat traffic in the summer have an impact on the actual surfacing of the HABs?
Anything that mixes water will make it harder for HABs to come to the surface. one of the things that very likely played an important role was how incredibly calm the water was.
Right.
When we first talked to folks, I remember Dr. John Kelly, who has a place over on Assembly Point, said it was unbelievably calm. You could drop a pin, he said, and you'd see the ripples from it. It was just, for November, it was really, really calm. So is the warm temperature playing a role? Is the calmness playing a role? Are they both playing a role? This particular species is what we call weakly buoyant, which means if it gets any kind of a breeze, it starts mixing back in the water. It can't stay on the surface. Different species have different abilities to be buoyant. Some are much stronger than others. This particular one is pretty weakly buoyant. The experts tell us that it's got to be really calm for it to come to the surface. So to answer your question, the more that you agitate
Yeah. Well, in
the
November,
water,
November had a very unusual 5 days or 7 days of warm weather in the 70s during that period too.
I'm not sure if you may have asked another question and my internet was lagging.
Okay, my question, was a point of information that in November had 5 or 7 days that it was very warm into the 70s. Very
Yeah.
unusual for us to have that.
Right. And that's really the question. So there's a couple of things that are important to think about. So the air temperatures in the 70s, the water temperature, except that the very not changing fast, right? It's really resistant. So the water temperature when we got there the next day was about 12 degrees. So it's pretty cold. So what's that? Maybe 50 degrees Fahrenheit. But that very surface film, maybe top centimeter or two, would have been similar to the air temperature. So we absolutely, consider that thin layer where the algae was surfacing would have been closer to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. The rest of the water column would have been quite cold.
Do we have any more questions?
Good job.
Thanks,
Sure.
everyone.
Thank
I
you.
know,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
very happy to share it and to share more info. Eric and Harry, if you have any comments, I think, I'll just say what an honor to help direct a team of this many dedicated people who just jumped at the opportunity to help. And again, within hours, they were there. So I couldn't be prouder of the team.
This is Eric. I would just echo those sentiments. And I would also add how grateful we are for this opportunity to share the latest with the Commission and to continue working with the Commission, DEC, and other players on this. This is a critical issue, no mistake. And it is, as Rick points out, going to require collaboration, start to finish. So thank you.
Yeah, this is Harry Kolar as well. Thank you for the opportunity to present. And obviously, it's a very, very important area for all of us. And we are committed to really finding some of the answers here. And we've thrown just about everything we have at the problem. As Rick mentioned, even mobilizing personnel. We had a vertical profiler in Harris Bay just about 24 hours later in the water, moored and recording data, as well as another one out at Calves Pen for a reference point, as well as Rick's teams going out and doing a great deal of sampling. So a lot of people, sort of came to call of duty and have really gathered a lot of data, which is going to take us months to analyze, but we're already making progress in this area, and we'll be very much looking forward to reporting back to you on it.
Hey,
Thank you. Do you have anything to add, Dave?
No, just thrilled that we have so many great people working on this topic. I've said for the last 3 or 4 years, as we're advancing our stormwater and stream corridor efforts, that the day that we get a harmful algae bloom on Lake George is the shot heard around the state, because Lake George being one of the most protected water bodies in the state, if it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. So we're just thrilled that we have so much work and so many great people working on this issue. And thank you again for presenting today.
Well said, Dave. Thank you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Dave, it's a report on the office building.
Yeah, so on a much less important topic, we're making some progress on our new office building. We're actually hoping to have it delivered tomorrow. Of course, it's a modular building, so the boxes are coming out of Pennsylvania. And as everything has gone in this project, it's not without its hiccups. We're supposed to get our first serious snowstorm over the next couple of days. And of course, it's down south where our boxes are coming out of from Pennsylvania. But either way, we're still making some good progress. We're expecting the boxes to hopefully be delivered tomorrow. Ruben Ellsworth and Dana Ellsworth, local folks, are kind enough to allow us to put these boxes that are 16 feet wide, 40 feet long at their property over at Magic Forest until we can get them actually put on the foundation. The site has been fully prepared. It's ready to go. We're building the fourth wall hopefully tomorrow to be in preparation for setting of those boxes, hopefully next Monday if they can arrange the crane date. And then it'll take about 6 weeks for the building to be completed. We do have a couple of resolutions moving forward with a few things to keep them in line if the commission would entertain those.
Thank you, Dave. The resolutions for the furniture procurement, do you have a copy of that in front of you, Ken?
Unmute myself here. I have a copy of the basement build out. Does somebody else have a copy of the first one?
I have a copy. Resolution
You have it, Joe?
2020. Yep, Resolution 2020-48. Whereas the Lake George Park Commission is moving into the new office building in February of 2021. And whereas the existing office furniture is several decades old and does not meet the needs of the new office space and conference area, and the budget of the building project includes funding specifically for new furniture, fixtures, and equipment. And whereas the office furniture for New York State agencies is available for procurement on New York State contract, which meets the New York State Office of General Services and Office of the State Controller requirements. Now therefore be resolved that the commission authorizes its executive director to execute a purchase order for New York State procurement contract provider Affordable Interior Solutions under the New York State contract number 231009 in the amount of not to exceed $30,000, including procurement, delivery, and setup on site in the new building. So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded to authorize the furniture procurement. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Carried. How about resolution number 49, Visitors Interpretive Center build out? Do you have that one, Kenny?
I do. Resolution 2020-49, acceptance of bid for Visitors Interpretive Center / basement build out. Whereas on October 28th, 2020, the Lake George Park Commission released an invitation for bids seeking qualified contractors to complete the build out of the new LGPC building basement space in preparation for the new Lake George Battlefield Park Visitors Interpretive Center, known as the VIC. And whereas the IFB was advertised on the New York State Contract Reporter website, local newspapers, and distributed directly to area construction firms as required by the New York State Finance Law and the Public Buildings Law. And whereas bids for the project were due on December 11th, 2020, and the commission received 9 bids for the VIC build-out work, and whereas commission staff has reviewed the bids received and finds the lowest cost responsive bidder is KEK Excavators of Palatine Bridge, New York, with a bid of $48,763. And whereas the commission finds in its best interest to award the bid to KEK Excavators and to enter into contract for the work detailed in the associated IFB. Now therefore be it resolved that the commission awards IFB number D20200100 to KEK Excavators. And be it further resolved that the commission authorizes the executive director to prepare and execute a contract in the amount of $48,763 for the aforementioned project, and that's a motion.
Second.
Second it.
Been moved and seconded to approve the center build out. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next item on the agenda is the information technology system update. Justin?
Hey, everybody. So when we started looking at the new office infrastructure, it became clear that it didn't really make sense to move all of our current information technology hardware into that new space. Most of our hardware is 6 or 8 years old. Some of the operating systems that we are using are no longer supported, which is a security liability. So we really saw this as an opportunity to kind of start fresh with an improved modern network and IT infrastructure. So Dave and I worked to put together a request for proposal, and that request was sent to 9 area IT service companies. We got 3 responses basically from the 9. 4 companies declined. We got no response from 2, and what we're looking for really is a cost-effective, secure, reliable network, and we're also looking for any company that we choose to install that network and infrastructure to maintain it. The commission does not have an IT staff. I've kind of been maintaining our system here, and I like to joke that our network is held together with bubble gum and duct tape, and in the future that won't be the case. So we're looking to upgrade some software to be kind of really move into the 21st century with everyone else. Dave, is there anything beyond that you'd like me to speak to?
Thanks, Justin. Very quickly, so we've been also working, as you know, on doing an online application and database management system that Joe Thune and Justin have really put a lot of time and effort in. What that means for the general public is instead of filling out all the paper forms and submitting paper documents, you'll now very shortly be able to go online, fill everything out in a much more efficient fashion, and then those interactions will be much more efficient and much more quick and reliable between the commission and the public. That's a big deal for us. Molly and Keith developed the original database that lasted for a good 30 years. This is the next generation of that, and we're pretty excited about how that's coming together, and that'll be a part of kind of the new system that Justin's working on right now.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you, Dave.
Sure.
We may be in the modern age at some point.
Getting closer.
We're getting there.
Law Enforcement Committee report. Mr. Parker.
Thank you, Chairman. The Law Enforcement Committee met this morning, and Lieutenant Johns brought us up to date on the situations with some boats and some engines. Also, the fact that the official standby patrol for the lake will be through next week, and then we adjourn for the winter, although we're always available. We then went into executive session to discuss some specific enforcement and ongoing enforcement issues, and took no action, made recommendations. And thus we do have a resolution 2020-50, whereas the Law Enforcement Committee met via teleconference December 15th, 2020, to review matters pertaining to the Lake George Park Commission's Marine Patrol and the Commission's law enforcement program. And whereas active law enforcement cases and their status were reviewed in executive session, And whereas the Law Enforcement Committee has reported on the results of that committee meeting at this full commission meeting, and whereas the Law Enforcement Committee recommends acceptance of this month's law enforcement report, now therefore be it resolved that the commission accepts the report of the Law Enforcement Committee, and that is a motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the Law Enforcement Committee report. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. We now reached the public comments portion of if there's anyone in the audience that wants to make a public comment, now is the time to do it. And Justin, I guess you'll have to monitor that.
Okay, Chris Nowitzki, I see your hand is up and you're muted.
Good morning, Commission. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I just wanted to thank the Commission on a couple items. First off, Dave for his work on extending the inspection program at the $1 Million Beach, as well as up north at Mossy Point. By some of our observations, and not just mine, some others, you know, the majority of the days had boat trailers in those lots. As many as 22 trailers were observed. So really, you know, this is I want to thank the commission for you know, investing that time and the effort to have those gates open. Again, we heard how that time of the year was unusually warm, brought more boat traffic, many of those from the south where there's higher invasive potential risks. So I want to thank the commission for that, as well as continuing the discussion to try to make that a more permanent situation. Also, I'd like to thank the two Joes, Joe Thuen, Joe Johns, for some of their time taking a look at a situation up by Sabbath Day Point, and the effort that they did on tightening up a project that was going awry. So I want to thank them for that. And closing, just wish everyone happy holidays. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. Anyone else, Justin?
Let's see, anyone else like to speak? I see a lot of the public are muted. So if you wish to speak, make sure you unmute yourself.
Mr. Chairman, while we're waiting for anybody else, just a quick follow-up to Chris's comment. I think we did do the right thing in extending the year a little bit longer this year. It seemed to work out well. Justin and Roger do an excellent job managing that program. The final report for this year will be coming out this afternoon to the wide world, the media, and the general public. So if you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to the office and we'll see if we can get them answered for you.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Rosemary, I'll unmute you. There you go.
I am unmuted. Thank you very much, Jefferson Project. I don't even know how to say this because this is not the venue, but anybody who has any ideas, please do something. HABs are a public health concern. A lot of us who live on the lake, we're not just recreating. I sincerely hope there is no more HAB. On the chance that there is, reporting to the general public, notification of people, this is a bad thing. I'm having a hard time finding out how people get notified there's a HAB. It's not easy. Right now, yesterday, we were told by the DEC, the best way is to go to NYHAB website, which is updated every day at 11 a.m. on weekdays only with any new HAB sighting. So that way you'd find out if you're able to use your water system if you happen to have water that comes from Lake George, or swim in it, or go boating in it, or let your dog play in it, all of the above. This is a little bit scary and a public health concern. Anybody has any ideas to help us, the public, it would be appreciated. Thank you and happy holidays.
Thank you, Rosemary. Anyone else, Justin?
Would anyone else like to speak? I don't see any hands up, and I don't see anybody unmuting themselves, so.
Move to
Joe
adjourn.
Stanek has a comment,
Oh,
maybe.
there's somebody.
Joe Stanek? Joe, did you have something you wanted to say?
I was going to move to adjourn if there's no other comments.
That's acceptable. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn in a second. All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned, and Merry Christmas to all of you.
Yeah, happy holidays, gang.
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry
Thank you.
Christmas.
And back. Safe driving.